In World War II, over 18,000 B-24 Liberators were built compared to only 13,000 B-17 Flying Fortresses. Despite the fact that the B-24 could fly faster and farther with twice the bomb load, the B-17 got all the limelight. In this video, we will try to explain why the B-24 got relegated to the shadows of history. For one thing, the B-24 wasn't pretty. In comparison, the B-17 Flying Fortress was a beautiful aircraft, and the Army Air Forces liked to feature it in propaganda films. The B-24 Liberator was boxy, dowdy, and looked more like a truck than a combat plane. So the B-17 was the star of the war, and the B-24 was the character actor. The B-17 was the first American heavy bomber in wide-scale use, and early war news accounts featured it more than any other bomber. It was at Pearl Harbor, albeit mostly as a target, in the Philippines in 1941. Early news reports from the Battle of Midway gave B-17s credit for sinking several Japanese carriers. In reality, they didn't hit anything. The early 8th Air Force raids in Europe were all B-17 missions. In 1938, B-17s had intercepted the Italian ocean liner Rex 600 miles east of New York to much publicity, so people were used to seeing them in the media. A lot of the missions the B-24 flew were not high publicity. The B-24 was critical in closing the Mid-Atlantic Gap, an important part of winning the U-boat war that gets little attention. The B-24 was pretty much the only heavy bomber used in the Pacific after 1942, until mid-1944 when the B-29 showed up. The Pacific is again a theater that gets less attention than Europe, even considering the longest bombing raid at the time, a 16-hour mission in 1943 to Balikpapan, Borneo. And if no publicity wasn't bad enough for the Liberator, the most famous B-24 raid was a disaster. Operation Tidal Wave, a mid-1943 attack on Romania's Ploiești oil fields, used B-24s exclusively because B-17s didn't have the range to reach the target. 30% of the attack force was lost, and another 30% was damaged. Despite claims after the mission, the raid didn't hurt production. Flying Fortresses had the similarly disastrous Schweinfurt-Regensburg mission 3 weeks later, which had even worse losses. But the Ploiești attack is the one B-24 mission that sticks out in people's minds as a complete failure. Finally, the B-24 wasn't popular with its own crews to the extent that B-17s were. The Flying Fortress was tougher than the Liberator, although the B-24 sustained lower loss rates than the B-17, which can be attributed to the more difficult missions the forts often flew. The B-17 was also easier to fly than the B-24. The Liberator's advantages, such as its higher speed, greater bomb load, and longer range, weren't enough to overcome its reputation as a finicky plane. Thank you for watching. You can support the channel by subscribing or leaving a like. Or you could follow this link if you want to learn about a pimped B-17.